Hello, this is Phil. This week's show is going to be a little bit different. In my rush to get out on the road after the holidays, I left a critical piece of hardware back in my house in Washington, D.C. That allows me to add the music and do some of the editing on the audio. So this week, you're going to get this podcast raw. No edit, no music. So, this is the podcast for Sunday, January 8th, 2005, coming to you from Cupertino, California. Before we get started, please keep in mind that the information and opinions expressed in this podcast are mine and mine alone, and do not necessarily reflect those of my past, current, or future employers. So, as I said in the intro, this is kind of going to be a little bit of a different podcast. There's not going to be any intro music, and you're going to get this raw without any form of audio editing or cleanup. So, let's see. So, with this, we're going to change a little bit of the format for this week. And what I thought I would do is just share with you kind of my impressions, having spent last week at the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas. I was going to meet with one of the listeners, Nick, but he was coming in Friday just as I was getting ready to fly out on Friday. So we ended up talking by mobile phone, but we're unable to get together. So hopefully, Nick, we can touch base next time I'm in your home city. I do have an upcoming appearance in New York City at the end of this week. So I will be in New York Wednesday night through Sunday morning. So if there's any listeners in New York City who want to get together, drop me an email at podcast@killerinnovations.com. Let's see. For this show, I'm going to talk about consumer electronics. This is going to be clearly an unedited, uncensored, just giving you my raw thoughts and feedback about innovations and the innovations I saw at the Consumer Electronics Show, and just kind of give it to you raw as I saw it. If you're a regular listener, you'll know that I don't talk about specific companies because it tends to get me into trouble with those companies. So I'm going to avoid not talking about specifics, but given that I'm kind of doing this off the cuff, unedited, I'm not going to guarantee that I won't talk about a company. And hopefully this will give you at least a little bit of impression and help you see how I, quote, evaluate companies and innovations. As part of my day-to-day job, I look at hundreds of companies, if not thousands of companies a year, technologies for potential investments or acquisitions or partnering deals. So, part of while I was at CES, I arrived, when did I arrive? It would have been late Wednesday night. Thursday was the only day that I had on the show floor, as Friday I was in meetings all day. So I literally had to cover the entire Las Vegas Convention Center in one day. So it's strap on the tennis shoes, hit it as soon as the doors open, and just keep moving. Now, part of the challenge for me when going to these kinds of events and trying to identify trends or looking at technologies is the ability to look at a new innovation or a new technology or a company and to be able to quickly grasp what it is about that company or what it is about that technology, and does it fit into something that I'm looking for, or is it something of interest. So part of this feedback, hopefully after going through this, you'll get a little bit of understanding of how to create and really tell your story. So if you're out there developing innovations and you're looking for large companies to potentially partner or invest or even acquire you, it really does come around to telling the story. So some initial impressions at CES. One is that the word innovation was everywhere. Everybody is out there trying to claim that they are being innovative. And the word innovation kind of typically does come across as being empty. It tends to be almost a brand message that people are trying to put out there regularly. And what the issue with this is that it's just not about the word. I mean, those of you who are listeners know hopefully know and hopefully have it internalized that innovation, just as the raw concept, is of no value. Innovation is about translating ideas into having impact. It's not about the word, it's about solving a problem, making a job easier, making it easier for someone to get a task done, creating enjoyment for somebody, being innovative in TV shows or content, whatever. But it's about having impact. One of the TV shows, or not TV shows, but TV commercials that are out there playing quite regularly now is this new Ford commercial where they claim Ford being innovative. Well, what has Ford really done in the cars? Yeah, they make improvements in the cars, but they're trying to capture, or at least trying to convey, that they're doing something radically different. I would argue that it's another kind of a brand image play rather than really truly being innovative, truly delivering something new. And so walking around the CES show, the word innovation was everywhere. I think for the next couple of years, the word innovation is going to be kind of the buzzword for the year. And so actually I was debating about the idea of trying to come up with a different word just to get out of the mainstream hip use of the word and find a different word that conveys the translation of ideas into new, different, creative impact, ideas that actually get implemented. So if any of you have ideas, send them to me. Maybe I'll collect them up and we can look for, what is the alternative word to innovation, particularly given that the marketing people are taking over control of that word and basically destroying its real meaning. The other thing that I noticed kind of at CES running around is that there's a lot of bad messaging. You look at trade show booths, you look at brochures, you're looking at signage above something that's new and different, and you realize that the messaging, the descriptions, the names, the thing that they're trying to use to get you to come in and take a look at what they're working on, very bad messaging, very unclear. Like I said, I had basically one day to cover the entire Las Vegas Convention Center, and I don't know how many miles of walking. I started at 9 and I didn't end until about 4:30 before I had to leave to go to a meeting outside the convention center. And I literally didn't even stop. I didn't even stop for lunch. So I basically had to figure out, walking up and down the convention floor, within about 2 to 3 minutes, glancing at booths as I walked up and down every aisle, was there anything of interest in this booth that I should stop in and take a look at? And I would say that probably 95% of the companies that were there did not convey a message to me that attracted me to come in and take a look at what it is they were showing there at the booth. Now, obviously, everybody goes to the main companies, whether it's Sony or Intel or Microsoft or Philips or whatever it is. But clearly, if you have an innovative technology, an innovative product, an innovative new concept, the real challenge here is how do you get that messaging? You basically have 2 to 3 minutes to convey to whoever it is, whether it's on your website, in this case on the trade show floor, of what it is that you're doing, and be very crisp and be very clear. Words are extremely important. But I'll tell you, a lot of really, really bad messaging at Consumer Electronics Show. Third thing that I came away with from CES this year was a lot of Me Too innovations. I don't think I've seen more, more TV screens, DVD players, mobile phones, all of them being almost identical. Very hard to differentiate, albeit they were all trying to do positioning with their technologies. I think it was LG was showing a 102-inch plasma. I think the thing was absolutely massive. One, you couldn't buy it; wasn't commercially available. Two, I don't know if anybody has a wall big enough for 102-inch plasma, but a lot of Me Too innovations. Not a lot of differentiation. It's a lot of same thing, maybe a little better price, but it is just um, again, I mean, if I looked at probably 95% of what was shown on the floor, a lot of it was just clearly just Me Too kind of technologies. And what the other thing and you come across when you look at kind of what I call Me Too innovations is what I would call herd mentality. You've got one clear thought leader out there, and then everybody else is trying to do kind of this rapid follow down this path. A lot of iPod lookalikes, a lot of works in TV screen technologies. It kind of falls in all over the place. But what you clearly saw is kind of the bucketing of these innovations, whether it be ultra thin, ultra small phones, kind of a lot of phones modeled off of the Motorola Razr. A lot of MP3 players looking a lot like iPods, etc. So what the end result is that you're really not seeing new innovations. You're kind of seeing this copycat or herd mentality. What was really missing is anybody that was really going to be bold and really take that step out and say, you know something, I'm not going to follow the herd. I'm not going to do what everybody else is doing, and I'm truly going to break new ground here. Very, very little of that at CES, at least this year. And it kind of in line with that Me Too, the other kind of broad observation at the show is what I would call so what innovations. And this kind of gets down to of just doing innovation for innovation's sake. This is just simply putting out something that you could constitute quote as being something totally new, when in reality it ends up coming across as quote innovation looking for a need. This is innovation that does not solve a user's problem. It doesn't help them do a job easier. It doesn't help them to create enjoyment. It doesn't have impact. It's kind of like a so what. It doesn't do anything for the user base. A lot of those kinds of innovations that were also being shown at Consumer Electronics, and it's clearly in this case they're doing it purely on what I would call a speeds and feeds. How many, what's the thing that you can put on your list that your competitors can't put on your list? So it's kind of what I would call competitive innovation or speeds and feeds innovation versus really looking at the jobs or the outcomes that your users are trying to achieve and how do you create innovations that allow them to do it better. The other kind of observation from Consumer Electronics is that design and innovation around design was clearly an area of focus for a lot of the companies presenting. Designs, the one thing is a smaller, thinner, color. If you look at the color schemes for a lot of devices this year are kind of into the, a wider palette of pastels. Not a lot of bold brights, but a lot of Motorola's was showing off kind of this bold but not overly bright, not a neon, but clearly a pink on the Razr side. Silver is clearly coming in as a big color on the design landscape. Apple White is still extremely popular, and again that gets kind of back to the back to the copycat or herd mentality around innovations. Apple comes out with something and then everybody wants to copy it. A lot of interesting things by some of the real design winners, albeit Apple's not a big show at Consumer Electronics because Macworld is the week after. So from that perspective, have to wait till next week to get feedback on Macworld in San Francisco. but Sony and others, Philips, ones that you clearly view as being in the pushing the innovation design curve, clearly had some interesting things going on. Sony is clearly trying to regain its leadership position around design and design innovation. So design, and you could clearly see at CES that design and industrial designers inside in the enterprises are clearly gaining a much stronger influence about products, about new technologies, about new markets they're going to go into. And this kind of again ties back to something that I talked about in one of the earlier podcasts around the fact that the MFA, the Master of Fine Arts, is replacing the MBA, the Masters of Business Administration. And I don't know if it was last week. I think it was last week or the week before. I got an email from one of the listeners who's actually has made the decision to go back to college and get a degree in industrial design, which is very bold and clearly I fully support and agree with that decision, given the emergence, and particularly at CES just reinforced the importance of design and the impact of design on new products. Now, around the design area, the whole issue is you're trying to figure out what is cool. What is the new thing. So if you think back to kind of the Mac when it came out and all the different colors, and then the iPod with white, what is going to be that new bold, that new technology, or not technology, but that new design that is going to be the trendsetter going forward. And it's kind of hard to describe until you see it. And to be quite honest, I didn't see anything at CES, now albeit I didn't get to do every booth. So some of you who are listeners who may have had booths at CES, don't be offended. I may not have seen it. But I didn't see anything that just kind of reached out, grabbed me, and said, boy, that really is the going to be the new thing for the next coming year. Now, the one thing that did kind of surprise me at CES was the one whole area down at the far end of the show floor, which clearly, or I should say clearly, it was in an area that I have no background or no experience in, and this is in the whole area of car customizing. So this is people taking massive stereo systems and tricking out or basically customizing automobiles, with video screens and audio that's in the hundreds, if not thousands, of watts of audio output, engines, tires, paint jobs, the full customization. I even saw one small little two-door car that actually had a 300-pound woofer called a sledgehammer mounted in it. If they turned up that woofer with the windows closed, it would blow the glass out. Now, I've seen this on TV, and you've seen some cars driving around, but this is kind of my first time. And I spent a fair amount of time, because what I quickly figured out in this case with CES is that there's some, when you find these kind of real fringe areas, things that, they're not mainstream, you're not going to see this in every car, but the effort and the energy and the innovation that's put into these areas that are fringe categories that potentially can make it into mainstream are excellent areas to look for kind of those crossover trends or those crossover technologies. In this case, talking about car customizing, these guys really push performance. And I went back following the show, and I've spent a fair amount of time over the last 2 or 3 days doing a little bit of research, and I spent a fair amount of time talking to the guys who do this car customizing. And to kind of give you the dichotomy at CES, every other place on the show floor, it's typically people walking around, business dress, sport coat, dark slacks kind of an environment. As soon as you cross over and you were in the venue, which had the car customizing area, it was T-shirts, lots of tattoos, lots of piercings. A completely different realm. And I spent a fair amount of time over there talking to these teams and individuals who do a lot of this car customizing to kind of get a feel for the history, where did it come from. And when you really think about it today, I just bought my wife a new car, a minivan, and this minivan happens to have kind of the in the ceiling DVD screens and all of that, so that kids and their friends in the back seat can watch videos. And to be quite honest, all of our kids are in college, but we end up babysitting a lot of our friends' kids who are all much younger, and we actually got it for them, not even for our own kids. We got it for the kids that we babysit a lot, on the weekends, etc., for their parents so they can get away. But when you think about it, it was really these car customizers who were the first ones to figure out how to take these small LCD playback devices and embed them into the dashboards and the seat backs. And they did them as these kind of specialized one-offs. Now they're pretty much, optional equipment that, any weekend auto person can put in. And now the mainstream auto manufacturers have picked them up and have actually put them in as standard equipment. So when you think about car customizing, these were the guys who came up with kind of the really pushing the envelope on tires, engine performance, car audio, car entertainment. These car customizers were the first ones to create and embed in-dash navigation systems. And now you can get them standard in vehicles. You can buy handheld units that are relatively cheap from companies like TomTom, etc. So what I really found interesting at CES was this, in the car customizing section, was the fact that here was at a major show that actually had an entire wing at the Las Vegas Convention Center, an area that clearly the customers and the market for that are outside of the traditional CES. But here was, ability for me to go to this show and kind of take a look at something that would be classified as being in the fringe, but gives you clear insight onto potential trends that could transition into new things. So, what did I see in the car customizing area that was of interest? Well, in-dash navigation is huge. Now it is really the consolidation of navigation, all of your audio, all of your media, your playback. And think about literally mini servers sitting in your car. Now, some of the car customizers literally were putting servers into the car. You can kind of predict that says, okay, in the future I'm going to need some kind of a server technology embedded in a car in order to store, whether that be my videos, my audio, my maps for my navigation, most frequent places that I'm interested in for my navigation system, all of that integrated together. Today, in the car customizing market, those all come from different players, not very well integrated. But starting to see in the car customizing market that literally building servers into your car in order just to maintain and track all the complex electronics that you have in these cars. And it was absolutely just amazing. I saw a car with its trunk open with 5 LCD screens and a waterfall, real water coming off the tail of the car, and this water would flow down into the trunk, and it actually had pumps that pumped it back up, so it had this continuous waterfall coming over the back of the open trunk. I was just amazed. So I think, so just kind of, rehashing what I saw at CES. One is this, kind of the bad messaging that was clearly out there. The word innovation being everywhere. It's kind of become the buzzword of the year. So let's come up with a new word rather than innovation to really mean what it is we're trying to push forward. A lot of Me Too innovations. I saw more LCD and plasma TV screens than I could shake a stick at. Mobile phones coming all over the place. So a lot of Me Too's. A lot of them are looking the same. Really, what was missing was any kind of a bold new breakthrough design or breakthrough concepts. A lot of so what innovations. things that just were not going to have. I didn't see an impact. I didn't see how it was moving forward and helping customers out there do a job easier, or create enjoyment, or save them time. Design was a focus, so you saw a lot of emphasis on look and feel, color, shape, thinness, color. And then there was the unanticipated innovation, which is this car customizing, which I was just totally blown away on, and clearly a market area that I'm going to be doing some tracking on. Well, with that, I guess my rambling here is we've gone to 25 minutes. So let me hurry up and give you the killer question for this week. And it is tied in a little bit to this the feedback that I'm giving you here on Consumer Electronics Show. So this week's killer question is, what regions or countries are predictive of emerging worldwide trends? What region or countries are predictive of an emerging worldwide trend? Now, for those of you who are in the U.S., you tend to have a U.S.-centric view. I am amazed when I travel around the U.S. and going out to dinner with customers or with fellow employees, or even friends on the weekends back in Washington, D.C., about how little the U.S. population really knows about worldwide culture and even geographies. Where is a country? But when it comes to identifying trends, back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, yes, you could probably say that the trends all began in the U.S. With the worldwide economy now, that is not the case many times. An example is in the mobile phone industry. Now, in the 80s and the early 90s, the U.S. set the tone for the mobile industry. And in many cases, up through, I would say, early 93, 94, 95, the U.S. led the worldwide market by about 12 months. So you would have all of the European and all the Asia-Pacific carriers coming to the U.S., look at what the U.S. was doing, take that information back, and they'd have about a year to work on it and improve it before that trend really caught into their own geography. Well, since 95 through 2005, that shift has completely gone the other direction. So, compared to the U.S., I would say, for instance, Japan and Korea are 12 months ahead of the U.S. Europe is 9 months ahead of the U.S., or 3 months ahead, or 3 months behind Japan and Korea. So Japan and Korea are the ones pushing the envelope. Europe is 3 months behind that. And the U.S. is 9 months behind. So think about it. In the last 10 years, we saw a complete shift where the U.S. was the lead to the point now where the U.S. is trailing. In many cases, U.S. carriers are off looking into those geographies to get ideas to bring that back. So it's a question that everybody should ask. And you can't always assume that your geography, whether you're in the U.S., whether you live in Europe, whether you live in Asia, Australia, New Zealand, whatever the case might be, that you cannot assume that your geography is the one that's setting any particular trend. And what typically happens is most companies do not bother to really do a heavy job. They'll read industry analyst reports about a service or a technology or a concept or a new kind of restaurant or how do they manufacture something in a certain country. But here's an opportunity for you to get yourself a competitive advantage by asking yourself the question of what regions or countries are predictive of an emerging worldwide trend. And once you've identified those, then track those heavily, but recognize that that may not be static. Just as 95 companies would focus on the U.S. for the mobile industry, now in the mobile industry, they now have to look at other countries to be the lead. So it's a constant shifting target. You need to take a global view, you need to take a global view And you got to get familiar in your area of interest worldwide, not just your area of interest in your local geography, your local region, and your local country. You have to take that global view. So again, this week's killer question is, what region or countries are predictive of an emerging worldwide trend? And then set up the process to identify, track, and get familiar with those trends as they come up, because by having that lead time, you can create a competitive advantage in your home country, in your home region. With that, thanks for listening. Keep the feedback coming. I've gotten a lot of emails. I know a number of you who tried to Skype me over the Christmas, New Year's holidays. I left my PC on and didn't set my away message. So I know a number of you tried to get a hold of me. So please don't hesitate. Go ahead and Skype me if you see me on. Don't forget to vote. Voting is the easiest way for you to tell the producers of your favorite podcast that you do appreciate the effort that they put into what it is you're doing. And again, I apologize for this being a very raw podcast without any music, without any really audio cleanup. But in that, like I said in the beginning, in my rush to get out, I didn't pack all of my equipment to come with me on this trip. So I'll talk to you next week, either from New York City or back in Washington, D.C. I will be in New York City Wednesday night, all day Thursday, all day Friday, and all day Saturday. So if you're going to be in New York City any of those days, drop me an email at podcast@killerinnovations.com. And I'll most likely be then in D.C. on Sunday. And then Monday, I actually fly back here to California. Okay? So again, thanks for listening. Please get subscribed. Get others to subscribe to the podcast. And we'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.